Now, there's a reasonable chance you may have seen the clip I'm about to play you. It's from President Trump's interview.
$500,000 in Canadian currency, as well as Superintendent Watts.
This will happen. I may go there sometime toward the end of the week.
What if the deadliest weapon on American soil wasn't a missile launched from abroad, but a candy-colored pill stamped with a lie and sold as medicine? That question became reality on a cool May morning in 2025, when agents from the DEA and ICE simultaneously stormed warehouses from Arizona to Oregon. Inside, they didn't find guns or bombs. They found 400 kilograms of fentanyl, enough synthetic poison to kill every man, woman, and child in New York City twice over. DW summarized the crisis with haunting simplicity. This is not a drug war. It is a chemical war waged against the soul of a nation. Operation Iron Veil was more than a tactical victory, it was a reckoning. It forced America to confront an unspoken reality. Its enemies no longer attacked from beyond its borders, but through its veins. And as dawn broke across 5 states, the agents who stood over mountains of blue poison knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning of a war unlike any America had ever fought. Beneath the deserts of New Mexico and the suburbs of Oregon, a quiet empire of poison thrived. What agents uncovered during Operation Iron Veil was not chaos, it was design. Behind unmarked warehouse doors, the Sinaloa cartel had constructed an industrial complex of synthetic warfare camouflaged beneath the facade of American normalcy. According to Reuters, the mastermind was Heriberto Salazar Amaya, a 36-year-old regional commander who ran Sinaloa's U.S. division like a corporate enterprise. His lieutenants handled logistics, finance, and security with chilling precision. In one Santa Fe storage unit, agents found 165 kilograms of fentanyl pills worth nearly $400 million. 2 blocks away, another raid revealed 365,000 pills heroin and an arsenal of 24 firearms just meters from a playground. BBC News described the operation as industrialized death disguised as commerce. ICE's digital forensics teams traced payments through shell companies registered in Nevada and Oregon, each designed to mask money trails leading back to Culiacan. The network used encrypted messaging apps, cryptocurrency, and offshore accounts to move billions without a trace. What investigators found most disturbing wasn't the scale, it was the sophistication. Jane's Defense Weekly reported that some of the processing labs discovered in Albuquerque mirrored military-grade chemical facilities equipped with containment systems, filtration units, and industrial pill presses capable of producing thousands of counterfeit tablets per hour. DEA chemists described them as weapons assembly lines. Each counterfeit pill bore familiar pharmaceutical markings, OxyContin, Percocet, Xanax, designed to deceive. But inside each one lurked a fatal 2-milligram dose of fentanyl. Just one error, one accidental inhalation could kill an entire raid team. The Guardian confirmed that under President Trump's executive order of 2025, cartels like Sinaloa were reclassified as foreign terrorist organizations. This legal transformation unlocked powerful intelligence tools, enabling joint surveillance by the DEA, ICE, and Pentagon. For the first time, counterterrorism protocols were applied within the continental United States, not against ideology, but against addiction itself. DW analysts noted that this approach blurred the boundaries between military and law enforcement. The Sinaloa cartel, one expert said, functions as a hybrid actor, combining the profit logic of organized crime with the strategic calculation of warfare. This wasn't a drug bust, it was a battlefield discovery. At dawn on May 8, 2025, America moved as one. From the high plains of New Mexico to the rain-soaked streets of Oregon, convoys of unmarked black SUVs rolled through the mist. Their radios spoke in encrypted bursts. In those moments before sunrise, the United States prepared to strike back. Operation Iron Veil began with the precision of a military campaign. Federal warrants were sealed under national security directives. At 4:00 a.m., tactical teams from the DEA, ICE, FBI, and U.S. Marshals executed simultaneous raids across 5 states. To the outside world, it looked like a drug bust. To those on the inside, it was something else entirely: a coordinated counterterrorism strike against a chemical army hiding in plain sight. Reuters later revealed the scale 16 high-level cartel operatives captured within 3 hours, including Heriberto Salazar Amaya, the U.S. command node for Sinaloa's synthetic drug network. Agents seized over 400 kilograms of fentanyl, 80 kilograms of methamphetamine, 7.5 kilograms of cocaine, and $610,000 in cash. But numbers alone couldn't measure the victory. Each tablet seized represented lives saved, entire communities spared from mass poisoning. The choreography was breathtaking. Drone reconnaissance teams coordinated by the Defense Department's Surveillance Division provided live thermal imaging of every target zone. Hazmat units in full protective gear swept through warehouses laden with volatile chemical dust. According to BBC News, one wrong movement, a single spark, could have caused catastrophic explosions. It was a counter-chemical strike, not a police raid, a federal official later told The Guardian. Inside the command center in Arlington, analysts monitored dozens of live feeds as agents advanced room by room. The operation unfolded with such precision that international observers compared it to NATO's rapid reaction doctrine. Defense News wrote that the multi-state coordination of Iron Veil mirrored battlefield synchronization, where disruption replaces destruction. By dawn, helicopters hovered over seized compounds while armored vehicles blocked escape routes. The streets of Santa Fe, Tucson, and Salem were eerily silent except for the rhythmic thud of rotors and the metallic snap of evidence crates being sealed. Federal agents carried out crates of pastel-colored pills, the same deadly counterfeit tablets that had claimed tens of thousands of lives across the United States. President Donald Trump, addressing the nation hours later, called the operation a counter-strike against the enemies who poison our people. His order authorized expanded interagency collaboration, giving DEA and ICE access to Pentagon intelligence networks monitoring cartel activity across the Gulf of California. "We will hunt them as we hunt terrorists," he declared. DW reported that this marked the first time since 2001 that a domestic operation was elevated to the level of national defense. The Pentagon provided satellite imaging and cyber reconnaissance to intercept encrypted cartel traffic. In effect, the US military had joined a new kind of war, one fought within its own borders, not against ideology but against chemistry. For local residents, the spectacle was surreal. In Albuquerque, families watched from their porches as agents in biohazard suits carried out crates of pills that, according to federal chemists, contained enough fentanyl to exterminate entire towns. In Tucson, a schoolteacher told Al Jazeera, "We woke up to helicopters and thought it was a movie, then realized it was saving our children." But victory carried unease. Civil liberties groups questioned whether the use of military-grade technology for domestic enforcement blurred the line between security and surveillance. How far can the government go? The Guardian asked before protecting Americans means watching them. Reuters confirmed that the joint operation codenamed Iron Veil unfolded across 5 U.S. states, stretching from the desert borders of New Mexico to the quiet suburbs of Utah. Federal agents moved like precision machinery, timed, coordinated, and relentless. Within hours, over 3 million fentanyl pills, 80 kilograms of methamphetamine, and an arsenal of 49 firearms were in federal custody. This wasn't chaos, it was choreography, wrote BBC News, describing the scene as a counterterrorism strike disguised as law enforcement. Yet for the agents who stood at the heart of Iron Veil, the mission was clear. They weren't just dismantling a cartel, they were averting a mass casualty event. One DEA commander described it simply, "We didn't arrest traffickers, we neutralized a weapon." And as the sun rose over 5 states that morning, the message was unmistakable. America's war had come home, but this time it was winning. When agents entered the final safe house in Santa Fe, they expected another stash of pills. Instead, they found a nightmare dressed as normalcy, children's drawings on the refrigerator, a half-eaten dinner on the table, and in the back room, boxes of blue fentanyl tablets stacked to the ceiling, a playpen sitting beside them empty. The line between innocence and annihilation had vanished. According to The Guardian, investigators recovered laminated instruction sheets detailing dosage ratios and counterfeit pharmaceutical stamps. Each page resembled a production manual from a legitimate factory. It was industrial death, one agent told Reuters. Every batch followed strict specifications, precise color weight imprint. Perfection in this context meant certainty of death. BBC News reported that the DEA laboratory called the scene a weapons assembly line. The cartel's pill presses imported from Asia bore serial numbers identical to those flagged by Washington in precursor export investigations targeting Chinese manufacturers. The machinery blurred international commerce and clandestine warfare, bridging continents through chemistry. But beyond the logistics lay the tragedy. During one raid, officers found a 5-year-old sleeping next to open bags of fentanyl powder, enough toxicity to kill thousands. DW News described the moment as the human cost distilled into a single breath. In Oregon, neighbors broke down as federal agents carried out crates from what they thought was a storage business. In Arizona, a teenage courier sobbed as he was led away unaware that the 20,000 pills in his trunk were weapon-grade poison. These stories exposed the new face of warfare. Civilians turned conduits, addicts turned soldiers, neighborhoods turned battlegrounds. Al Jazeera English compared the phenomenon to proxy conflict through human desperation, where profit and dependency fuse into control. Every addict became both victim and vessel. Federal analysis from Defense News confirmed that Sinaloa's network relied on microcells, small, self-sustaining hubs, each holding millions of lethal doses. This decentralized model mirrored the tactics of extremist cells. Worldwide redundancy ensures resilience. Even if one lab fell, another emerged quietly elsewhere. As one counter-terror official explained, they've adopted our enemy's doctrine, distributed warfare hidden inside civilian life. Globally, the pattern repeated. In Ukraine, hybrid combat blurred lines between combatant and civilian. In Israel, fentanyl analogs appeared in intercepted weapons caches linked to Iranian proxies. Intelligence from Jane's Defense Weekly noted increasing cartel cooperation with cybercriminal groups in Asia to source precursors and launder profits. The chemical trade had become a transnational web crime industry, and geopolitics indistinguishable. President Donald Trump responded by signing an emergency order establishing the National Counter-Fentanyl Task Force, merging DEA, ICE, and Pentagon assets under one unified command. This is not addiction, it's assault, he declared from the Oval Office. The move drew both applause and alarm. Supporters hailed decisive action. Critics warned that blending military and police authorities risked permanent militarization of domestic policy. For years, the Sinaloa cartel had perfected a new kind of warfare, one fought not with bullets, but with chemistry. According to Jane's Defense Weekly, their internal structure mirrored NATO-style logistics systems, decentralized supply hubs, encrypted communication networks, and contingency chains capable of surviving infiltration. It was warfare without uniforms, profit-driven, but strategically precise. Yet for millions of Americans, the debate felt abstract against the grief. In 2024, more than 75,000 citizens died from fentanyl overdoses, more than all U.S. combat deaths in 2 decades of war. In towns across the Midwest, flags hung at half-mast, not for soldiers abroad, but for sons and daughters lost at home. BBC News called it America's silent battlefield. Streets once defined by playgrounds and coffee shops now echoed with sirens and overdose calls. Teachers carried Narcan. Police wore gloves for fear of accidental exposure. Paramedics described neighborhoods as chemical minefields. Behind every number stood a family, and behind every family a question too heavy for politics. When an invisible war invades your home, how do you fight back without losing your humanity? Operation Iron Veil had saved countless lives, but it also revealed the fragility of a nation where comfort and catastrophe can share the same address. Operation Iron Veil may have unfolded on American soil, but its shockwaves reached every corner of the world. What began as a domestic counter-narcotics mission soon emerged as the front line of a global chemical conflict, one fought not with missiles or tanks, but with molecules and algorithms. Reuters confirmed that the DEA's post-operation analysis linked fentanyl supply routes directly to transnational shipping hubs in China's coastal provinces. From there, chemical precursors were rerouted through Latin American ports before reaching cartel labs in Mexico. Beijing denied state involvement, but BBC News cited U.S. intelligence assessments suggesting that private Chinese suppliers played a key role in sustaining production. The result was a geopolitical powder keg, America's most deadly narcotic, traced to the factories of its greatest rival. Defense News described the strategy as synthetic warfare, a form of conflict where chemistry replaces artillery and addiction replaces invasion. The Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels, now designated as foreign terrorist organizations under President Donald Trump's 2025 executive order, were effectively waging proxy wars for profit. This is globalized chaos, one Pentagon analyst told DW News. Every gram of fentanyl crossing our border is a microstrike against our society. Across Europe, the implications were immediate. German authorities, confronting their own surge in synthetic opioid trafficking through Eastern Europe, began modeling operations after Iron Veil. The DW Berlin desk reported that NATO intelligence agencies now classify fentanyl smuggling as a hybrid threat, placing it alongside cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns. France's counterintelligence service created a task force named Projet Chimère to trace precursor flows from China into North Africa. The West, for the first time in decades, faced a common invisible enemy weaponized chemistry. The parallels in warfare were unmistakable. Jane's Defense Weekly drew comparisons between Iron Veil and Ukraine's drone warfare doctrine, preemptive, precise, reliant on intelligence integration. Both, it argued, represent the convergence of defense data and deterrence. In the Middle East, Israel's Mossad reportedly intercepted fentanyl analogs linked to Hezbollah's financial networks. In Iran, cyber attacks targeting industrial chemical plants increased, prompting Tehran to accuse the US of retaliatory digital strikes. Meanwhile, Al Jazeera English reported a grim new chapter: the emergence of fentanyl-laced morphine packets on Russian front lines in Ukraine, allegedly supplied through black market channels. NATO intelligence concluded that the substance's presence on battlefields indicated experimentation with low-grade chemical agents disguised as medical supplies. The frontier between war and crime had officially vanished. President Donald Trump, speaking from the White House hours after the seizures, called it the largest counter-chemical operation in our nation's history. His message was unambiguous: we are treating this not as a narcotics issue, but as an act of chemical aggression. Under his directive, the Department of Homeland Security formally reclassified high-volume fentanyl networks as chemical warfare threats, a historic policy shift aligning domestic narcotics enforcement with national defense. Back in Washington, President Trump's administration redefined its national defense strategy accordingly. The Continental Shield Initiative, launched weeks after Iron Veil, combined DEA, ICE, and the Pentagon under a unified intelligence command. Fentanyl is not commerce, the president declared. It's chemical warfare against civilization. The doctrine treated cartels as enemy combatants, not criminals, transforming domestic drug enforcement into global deterrence. The Guardian called it the militarization of morality, warning that the blending of counterterrorism, public health, and homeland security risked creating an unending war without borders. Civil rights advocates cautioned that data surveillance tracking pharmaceutical imports, digital payments, and private communications could erode the very freedom such security sought to defend. Yet, for most Americans, these concerns felt distant compared to the funerals happening daily. In Ohio and Oregon, crosses lined the roadsides like silent statistics. Teachers carried Narcan next to lesson plans. Police wore respirators at crime scenes. The line between soldier and civilian blurred. Globally, the age of chemical asymmetry had begun. DW called it the third front of modern warfare: cyber informational and now synthetic. Where nations once fought for land, they now fought for survival of their populations. And beneath the triumph of Iron Veil loomed a sobering realization: the next world war might not begin with a missile launch or a cyber breach, but with a shipment of powder hidden in a box labeled medical supplies. The question for humanity was no longer whether such wars could be fought, it was whether civilization itself could endure them. By the winter of 2025, America had entered a new era, one defined by vigilance and haunted by victory. Operation Iron Veil had crushed a network that could have killed millions, but it also birthed a doctrine that redefined the soul of the Republic. The war on drugs was over. What emerged in its place was the war for survival. Under President Donald Trump's Continental Shield Initiative, fentanyl cartels were no longer treated as criminals, but as transnational terrorists. The DEA, ICE, and Pentagon now operated under a single intelligence architecture known as Sentinel Command, a 24-hour surveillance grid linking law enforcement with military reconnaissance. Drones tracked chemical shipments from the Pacific, satellites monitored border corridors, AI flagged suspicious financial flows before money could vanish into crypto shadow markets. Reuters described the transformation as the fusion of defense and enforcement. Defense News went further, calling it the birth of chemical counter-warfare. According to insiders, the system integrated over 180 federal, state, and international partners, including NATO's counter-proliferation divisions. Every operation from Miami to Mazatlan now fed into a global command pipeline, proof that America's war had transcended geography. The results were undeniable. Within 6 months of Iron Veil cartel shipments through Arizona and Texas dropped by 40%. overdose deaths began to decline for the first time in a decade. But even as the nation breathed relief, a quieter unease took hold. The Guardian warned that to fight invisibility, the state has learned to see everything. Defense news analysts noted that the move brought U.S. counter-narcotics efforts into alignment with NATO's counter-proliferation doctrines, preemptive strikes, full-spectrum surveillance, and synchronized disruption of supply networks before deployment. The United States, one analyst wrote, has begun to treat cartels as what they've become non-state actors with weapons of mass effect. Citizens began to notice subtle shifts, delivery trucks scanned by chemical sensors at city checkpoints, financial transfers automatically flagged for analysis, biometric verification expanding at airports and pharmacies. The security grid that protected the nation now surrounded it. Safety, wrote DW News, has become both shield and shadow. Internationally, the precedent rippled outward. Germany, Canada, and Israel launched parallel operations under America's doctrine of chemical containment. In Europe, the EU established a synthetic threat council modeled directly on Sentinel Command. But adversaries took a different lesson. Beijing accused Washington of militarizing morality. Moscow's state media mocked America's vigilance as the tyranny of paranoia. Yet the moral weight of success was undeniable. In towns once devastated by overdose, church bells rang again. Parents no longer hid Narcan in their purses. The blue pills that symbolized despair had vanished from shelves. The war was worth it, said a New Mexico paramedic to BBC News, but we've changed. We look at everything differently now. Inside Washington, that change had a name: total awareness doctrine. It was the logical conclusion of Iron Veil. Every molecule monitored, every border digitized, every potential threat preempted. Supporters saw it as evolution. Critics saw it as erosion. Freedom wrote, "The Guardian cannot thrive under constant suspicion." Still, for the Trump administration, the calculus was clear vigilance or vulnerability. The president's closing statement on the one-year anniversary of Iron Veil captured the paradox perfectly. We have not lost our freedom, we have made it strong enough to survive. But even as applause filled the White House lawn, a lingering question echoed beyond the celebration. If the cost of survival is perpetual surveillance, can liberty still call itself free? Because the next battle may not come from the deserts of Mexico or the ports of Shanghai, it may come from within, from a society learning to live beneath the watchful comfort of its own protection. The Iron Veil may have fallen, but its shadow, silent and protective, now stretches across every corner of the Republic. And somewhere in that shadow, America must decide what it wants: more safety that never sleeps, or freedom that sometimes dreams. Globally, the parallels were chilling. In Ukraine, seized Russian depots revealed chemical precursors identical to those used in cartel labs. In the Middle East, Iran and Israel traded accusations of chemical sabotage. In East Asia, intelligence traced precursor exports from Chinese factories to Latin American ports, evidence of a shadow alliance linking global commerce to global death. The parallels abroad were undeniable. In Ukraine, hybrid warfare tactics blurred civilian and military boundaries. In Israel and Iran, sabotage and cyber attacks targeted chemical facilities. In the Pacific, Chinese syndicates exploited global shipping lanes to funnel precursors to Latin America. What began as trafficking had evolved into geopolitics, a silent arms race fought with molecules instead of missiles. But amid the data, the evidence, and the global implications, the human toll told the truest story. Over 75,000 Americans died from fentanyl overdoses in 2024. According to Al Jazeera and CDC data, more deaths than the entire Vietnam War. In small towns from Ohio to Oregon, addiction had become a weapon of erosion. Parents buried children. Children grew up in homes haunted by ghosts. Every factory the agents raided was a tomb disguised as enterprise. Every crate of pills a loaded gun pointed at the nation's heart. Defense News summarized it bluntly: the Sinaloa model is war by commerce, industrial precision weaponized through human weakness. Operation Iron Veil exposed the cartel's blueprint divide, decentralized disguise. It showed how a network without borders could infiltrate the arteries of a superpower without ever firing a shot. And as agents sealed the evidence, one grim realization settled in America: wasn't just fighting criminals, it was fighting engineers of annihilation. The scope was unprecedented, the method invisible, the enemy faceless. But behind the geopolitical intrigue lay a more human cost. Across America, addiction had already hollowed out cities, families, and futures. Fentanyl had become the silent pandemic, the weapon that turned compassion into dependency, medicine into murder. Hospitals overflowed, morgues filled, and families buried loved ones who thought they were taking painkillers.